Welcome to the Lance Wallnau Show. Today's very special show, I might add. Sitting in front of Das Kapital behind me is the scene of one of the great historic events that affected your life and my life. I'm talking about January 6, 2021. That's the date that will live in infamy, January 6, 2021. And I've listened to the narrative that was crafted and sold to America by that theatric show that was called The Hearings, where Nancy Pelosi was asked to put one or two Republicans on that actually might cross-examine people and get more facts from them. And she said, absolutely not. We're going to stack this thing with Republicans that hate Trump and want to accuse everyone who went to Washington of being like domestic terrorists. Well, is there ever going to be any truth that comes out about what happened on January 6th? Well, there's a committee that's been well-funded and led by a congressman from Georgia who said, I've got two conditions. One, give me the resources necessary to do the research of what really happened. And two, I don't want to make this a Republican or a Democrat issue. I want to be able to tell the truth the way that I see it and the way that we get the facts. Barry Loudermilk is the congressman from Georgia who is heading up that investigation. And boy, does he have some interesting stories to tell. I ran into him on John Solomon's reporting. He's been on various broadcasts. But I think the real story came out to some degree from me being able to schedule a conversation with him at the Courage Tour in Georgia. That's where we go. TheCourageTour.com is how you can find out about it. And in Georgia, I just put him on the stage. And after he delivered a keynote, I grabbed the chair, said, Congressman Barry, will you sit down with me for a minute? Boom. And then I got into the conversation. We got into some stuff that you don't normally hear. I want you to hear it. This is Congressman Barry Loudermilk in this segment. And by the way, if many of you that I'm talking to, and I noticed this in our audience that were there, many of you that are as you're getting older, you're dealing with chronic pain in various areas of your life. Well, the interesting solution that I found is that if we look at the cellular activation or the internal repair system that God gave you, it's kind of miraculous. You actually were meant to live longer than you are living. I think in Genesis, God adjusted man's lifetime, but it was down to like 120 years for like Abraham, and 70 plus 10 is in Psalms. So you really shouldn't be suffering the way that you are from the kind of degeneration that is taking place if you know what to do. I want to suggest to you that the power that made you is the power that can transform you. We call it level 10 matrix. Before you medicate, before you operate, do a little research on cellular regeneration and how you can see literally years added back to your life, strength back to your body. Go to level10matrix.com. That's what you want to do. Go to level10matrix.com or call 1-800-361-2270. If you're on Facebook or Instagram, by the way, watching this, just put the word matrix in, and we'll send you a link to be able to get some information. I think you ought to talk to somebody and get a free consultation on whether or not Level 10 Matrix works for you, because I'm hearing nothing but the most amazing testimonies coming back to me week in and week out from people that are working with this particular therapy. It's, I would say it's virtually miraculous, but I'm not a doctor, so I'm going to let the doctors explain how it is that cellular regeneration is rebuilding people from the inside out. You want to call 1-800-361-2270 or go to level10matrix.com. Can't be more enthusiastic about this because it's kind of the big story that's happening in the last couple of weeks with our research. All right, let's get into the work of Congressman Barry Loudermilk. Tell us, what have you come up with so far, Congressman?
Well, as I told Kevin McCarthy, is that on? Okay.
Yeah, bring him up a little bit, a little louder.
Then Speaker Kevin McCarthy tapped me to investigate this. I told him, I said, are you sure? You know, they went after me. He said, that's exactly why I'm choosing you, because you had the courage to stand up to them instead of just cower and run. And you know how they operated, because they manufactured evidence against you. They brought up false narratives. And so we were supposed to receive every piece of investigation and every transcribed interview and deposition and every exhibit that they the select committee, being they, had acquired during their investigation. So the first thing we do is we go in and we start looking at what we have, and we start realizing we don't have everything. There's key testimonies that we did not have. We ended up finding out that they had sent some to the White House and some to the Department of Homeland Security. These are House documents. They don't belong to the executive branch. So we started trying to get those. We also found out that they had videotaped every interview they did. Hundreds and hundreds of interviews they videotaped, and we didn't have any of those. We still don't. We're still realizing now, even as of just 2 days ago, meeting with my staff, there may be more information that they have disposed of. We found out we're got a hearing next week on why it took so Trump had authorized the National Guard on January 3rd up to 10,000 troops, which we revealed that was true, even though the Select Committee said he was lying when he said that. What they did is they took those testimonies. That's some of the stuff that got sent to the White House and DHS. They've actually hid exculpatory evidence so the American people couldn't see it.
Stop. They hid what would exculpatory evidence contain?
Well, for instance, Tony Ornato, who was the head of, he was the director of operations, deputy director, chief of staff for operations. He used to be Trump's lead detail, Secret Service detail. Trump brought him on as permanent staff. He was the guy directing Secret Service. So one of the things that he had testified in one of his many testimonies they called him in for was that he was in the room when the chief of staff, Mark Meadows, called the mayor of Washington, D.C., and specifically was encouraging her days before to take Trump's offer of troops up to 10,000 National Guard troops that he had also offered to Nancy Pelosi. The Select Committee said that never happened. That was a lie, but it was actually in his transcribed interview, the transcription, which was hidden. We found that. It's like, okay, this is exact opposite, as well as like the driver of the SUV. If you remember, there was one lady that testified, which is interesting how she did this, but she testified that Trump tried to take control of the SUV, the steering wheel, and then tried to choke a Secret Service agent. He was so mad he couldn't go to the Capitol. Well, that story came up after this one young lady who worked in the White House had testified 3 times already, and none of that ever came up. However, she got called in for a 4th testimony. Between her 3rd and 4th testimony, she had a meeting with Liz Cheney. After the meeting with Liz Cheney, she fired her attorney, and Liz Cheney provided her with another one, pro bono. Then that's when all these sensational stories came out. As soon as that she told those stories, the committee had an emergency televised hearing that wasn't scheduled because they wanted to parade her before the American people to hear these outrageous stories, but they never corroborated it before they put the narrative out. Afterwards, as we started acquiring some of these testimonies, I told our investigative team, I want you to not only look at what they were asked and how they answered it, but I want you to look at what wasn't asked. So when this lady made these stories, that was in June, when she made them public, they didn't even call the driver, the Secret Service driver of the SUV, they didn't even call him in for testimony until September. Do you know they never asked him if that story was true? They didn't even ask him about Trump trying to take the steering wheel from it. He had to interject it himself. Wow. Now, one thing an attorney will tell you is you never ask anything under a sworn deposition, especially to Congress, that you weren't asked. So if he wasn't telling the truth, here is this guy saying, I tell you what, you never gave me a chance to perjure myself, so I'm going to go ahead and do it now willingly. That is impossible. He had to interject that never happened. When you start looking at all these different sworn testimonies of people who were with Donald Trump at that time, they all discredit those stories.
Yeah, and that's just one instance. How about the Washington, D.C. chief of police? So I watched Tucker interview him, and he was never called up to the interview, and he had an argument that why was he kept out of the debriefing from the intelligence community when he asked to be, and why was he deliberately circumvented, and why was his request for additional help ignored and answered by New Jersey, of all things?
Yeah, there's a lot in that simple question. His chief's son, he was the chief of police of Capitol Police at the time, and we've had him in several times. He's done testimonies. He texts me all the time. He's a wealth of information. The biggest issue that leads up to that is there was actionable intelligence that there was a threat against the United States Capitol on January 6th by some extremist groups. Trump was briefed on January 3rd about this, and Trump's response was, get the National Guard ready to deploy. Now, he can't deploy the National Guard because of separation of powers under the Constitution. It has to be requested from Congress, but he ordered the Guard to be ready to deploy up to 10,000 based on that intelligence. The FBI had the intelligence. The CIA had the intelligence. The NSA had the intelligence. All our intelligence community knew of a credible threat against the United States Capitol. They sent that intelligence to the Capitol Police Intelligence Division, but it never got passed on to unit commanders or the chief of police. He was blindsided. So one of the things we're investigating is, was that because of incompetence, or was it purposefully suppressed? And so that was part of his background, is he had no idea. That's why they didn't have, well, he actually had requested the National Guard a couple of days before, just from intelligence that he was gathering on his own, like, how many hotel rooms there were and how many permits to protest around the Capitol. He wanted more officers on duty because that, it's just something that you do. He even requested the National Guard a couple of days before. It was turned down. He requested it again. He ends up requesting them 7 times before it was approved. Every time he requested it, now he's requesting it of the Capitol Police Board, which is the 2 Sergeant-at-Arms, House and Senate, and the architect of the Capitol, who basically report to the leaders of each house, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. Every time he requested National Guard, even after there was a breach of the Capitol, he was turned down because they didn't like the optics.
They didn't like the optics, but they loved putting up those walled fences after the event, and so that they could dramatize the danger of Trump's movement.
And Nancy Pelosi said she liked the optics of having the fence afterwards. We also have had an informant from the Secret Service that we're verifying that the Secret Service offered that fencing to Pelosi 2 days before January 6th, and she turned it down.
This is what America needs to know. So you're of the opinion that they created a crafted narrative, and the whole J6 committee was to enforce a narrative on America, just like Russian collusion. It was all propaganda.
If you go back and you look at the resolution that was created to create this select committee, it was supposed to be made up of 8 Democrats and 5 Republicans. Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader, Republicans selected who he wanted to make sure the narrative was balanced, and Pelosi vetoed him. He said, well, you can't do that. Then we're not going to put anybody on there. Well, she had already selected Liz Cheney to be one of the Democrat opponents.
Republican, yeah.
Well, she appointed her as one of the Democrats, even though she was Republican. So they chose another anti-Trump guy, and they just had, really, there was no balance in it whatsoever. But the resolution that created it set up teams. There was a red team, green team, blue team. Red team was basically looking at the White House and their operation and what may have happened there. Green team was who was funding all this. And the blue team was the security failure at the Capitol, which was supposed to be the core of this entire investigation. We cannot find any information from the blue team and what they handed over. It was like they never did anything, but we do know they did because we actually have some informants who were there who they were really upset that none of the work that they did trying to figure out the security failure at the Capitol ever got published or anything was done with it. I will assume, 1, they didn't want it to be part of the narrative, or 2, they uncovered something they weren't supposed to, so it had to be suppressed. But either way, consistently what we're told by staff members who were there is that Liz Cheney effectively took over the entire committee. Not the chairman, she took over, and then she basically had an agenda. Look, Trump had said some bad things about her daddy. And she was upset about it. I see that. But you don't risk the security of this nation and weaponize government just to have retribution on somebody you don't like. And that was basically everything they did was to support a narrative that Trump caused the January 6th riot that was involved.
Now, who's the congressman that's been in the media who said that he's particularly concerned about, he believes over 100 to 200, possibly more, plainclothes FBI agents dressed in MAGA outfits, etc., So what do you guys interact with him at all in terms of who is that again?
Probably Clay Higgins from
Higgins, yes. How many of you have been following that? You all ought to need to be following this stuff. If you've got plain clothes FBI people dressed like MAGA people, 100 of them, 200 of them in the crowd, and they did nothing to stop what took place, were they helping facilitate what took place? You understand the question? If they're willing to control the investigation, to suppress information, then they certainly might be guilty of participating. This is the significance of that January 6th research.
Amidst the challenges of eroding core values like faith, family, and freedom, there's a great awakening coming to America. And we're here to equip you. Lance Wallnau and Mario Murillo have rallied insightful speakers, guaranteed to empower all who attend the 2024 Courage Tour. Receive clarity and inspiration that will impact your life and community. Visit thecouragetour.com and join Lance and Mario for the Courage Tour coming to an area near you. When we band together, courage is contagious.
I got to get the answer to this.
So, yeah, Clay, he's not on our committee because he's not on the full committee the subcommittee's under. But we do, as we call, read him in on a lot of stuff, and we'll wave him in on some of the hearings. It's a very complicated and complex issue there because it is expected that you're going to have federal agents anytime that there is a huge crowd. Park police will go undercover, FBI will go undercover. Like when we have the March for Life, it's a huge event. There are agents embedded in the crowd. They're looking for anyone causing trouble, which could be, rabid pro-choicers coming to, pull a bomb or something. So it's not unusual to have those agents in the crowd. What is unusual is when those agents don't do anything to help stop or participate in it. We actually have video that we verified of a Metropolitan Police officer undercover encouraging protesters to go into the Capitol.
Stop it.
No, that's been verified because somebody sent me the video, and I'm like, okay, I always take the approach of if you seek to prove something true, you will every time, because you'll discredit any evidence that's contrary.
Right.
So I tell my team, anytime we get something like this, I want you to try to prove it false. If you can't, then you got the truth. So in our effort to prove it false, I wrote a letter to the Metropolitan Police Department, DC's local police. I said, send me all the body cam video and GoPro video of every officer that responded to the violence on January 6th. So they sent us that. And guess what we found in it?
What?
GoPro video of that guy telling people to go into the Capitol. So, but then we do have evidence that we've uncovered recently of there were some FBI agents that went up there on their own. And there's one that went, and he went to pray. And they went with some other agents. I think he was even from the Texas area. They were there. There was a prayer meeting going on. When they saw what was happening, they tried to go help. And then they got arrested. And so it's a very complicated and complex. And as I tell our team, there is as many conspiracy theories out there as there is truth. So we have to filter through that. But there is so much truth that is just unbelievable. You don't have to build up any conspiracy theory with it. And so, yeah, Clay has done a lot of work there. I mean, one of the things we just had is a hearing about the 2 pipe bombs.
Yeah, what about those pipe bombs? You guys are familiar with that story? The pipe bombs that nobody ever talks about? Because it really looks like they were planted there in case Plan A didn't work with the insurrection, Capitol break-in, rowdy crowd. There was the pipe bombs planted by the dangerous Trump people, except that once they were alerted about the existence of the pipe bombs, they never stopped people, kids, or anything, walking past the pipe bombs because somebody knew they were duds. They were planted. It really wasn't ever going to blow up.
Well, that was one of the questions we had because we're looking at surveillance video, and even once they find them, the Capitol Police, and look, the frontline officers of Capitol Police, they're trying to do their job. They love what we're doing, that we're trying to find what really happened because, I mean, there were some that really were harmed and injured during this, but they know that, and they love Chief Son, by the way, but they really appreciate what we're doing investigating this. They deployed to the Republican National Committee and the Democrat, the DCCC, Democrat Congressional Committee, where Kamala Harris was actually at the time. Now, she's the vice president-elect, which means she has Secret Service protection. As they're responding to these, obviously, pipe bombs that were identified by citizens, they never put up a perimeter around them. And so we had a hearing asking, police, why didn't you put up a perimeter? Well, their answer was the Capitol is, being surrounded. We were shorthanded and all this, and that is because it's off Capitol grounds. Both of those are under Metropolitan Police. But I'm like, you guys respond to this kind of stuff 24/7, 365 days a year. You've got procedures. But the most interesting thing was over at the DCCC. We went back and went.
What's a DCCC?
That's the Democrat.
Thank you. I just want them to know.
Headquarters. It's another dinner club there. And that's where Kamala Harris was. And so the Secret Service goes there to advance of her coming. They sweep the area with what is supposed to be a bomb-sniffing dog who walks within as far as from here to that podium from the pipe bomb twice and never alerts to it. So that's a question we have, right? And so we're calling the Secret Service in, what about this? So even when the robot is going in, literally the robot is going in to disarm the pipe bomb, a guy in a suit walks right next to the robot and is just looking at it like this. I'm like, okay, somebody.
This is like Monty Python does Secret Service work.
But there's another one, real quickly, if I could. How many of you seen the picture of the gallows? So there was an actual gallows erected on Capitol Hill property on the west side where most of the protest was going on. If you see any of Biden's campaign commercials, it has that gallows with a noose with the Capitol dome behind it. The narrative of the Select Committee on January 6th is that those gallows were erected to hang Mike Pence. No one knew whether Mike Pence was going to
exactly
until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Those
precisely
were erected at 6 a.m. in the morning and stayed up all day long and into the evening. So another part of our investigation no one was looking at is, why weren't they taken down? This is on Capitol property. It had to be, Capitol Police had to notice that these gallows were there, and it stayed up all the way up until that evening. And so this is another area that's hit a lot of the press is because we're just asking the questions. Why? What's the purpose? We're trying to figure out who it was because they carried them down Pennsylvania Avenue. It was on a hand truck. It was pre-constructed at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so we're trying to figure out who these folks were. We call him Fedora Man. It's a guy wearing a long trench coat and it's actually one of those English cabbie hats.
Yeah.
It's Fedora. But there was a group of 5 or 6 of them, which they do appear later during the protest wearing some Trump gear. But it's how did this stay up all day? If it was there to hang Mike Pence, nobody knew what Mike Pence was going to do until he announced it about 1:30 in the afternoon. So it's another one of those things that now the Democrats have jumped on this and say, see, this is how rabid MAGA people are. I try to remind folks is the amount of violence that we had throughout the nation through 2020, majority of it was from the Democrats.
It was Democrats. It was like $2 billion worth of damages.
And so we already had this tense environment of where we were in this nation. And, whatever the truth is about that, I've got my own theories and suspicions of what happened that day, which, if you haven't seen it, we issued an interim report about a month ago that uncovered a lot of the evidence that the Democrats had suppressed. Now, Liz Cheney has tweeted out that, oh, no, when we did our report and posted online, you can drop down on the website and see all the supportive information. That's great. But what about the information that didn't support your narrative? That's what.
Well, when will this all come out, Barry? Because I'm concerned that this stuff doesn't come out.
It's out already. If you go and look at the interim report, you can just Google the Committee on House Administration Subcommittee on Oversight January 6th report. It's out there. It's about 100 pages of what we found out in each category of what we've investigated so far. The first year of our investigation was just investigating, trying to find the missing documents. We even found that they deleted 100 or more documents from the hard drives. We hired a forensics team to go deep into the hard drives that they handed us and found that they had deleted several documents, and many of those are password protected, highly encrypted. And so we're still trying to get them.
So it's a high level espionage. Somebody can write a best-selling book right now by just putting out a 100-page summary of the January 6th, deception. Just write the book. I guarantee it's a bestseller. People are writing books all the time. Write this one.
We've had authors reach out to me and say, hey, and I said, well, I really want to complete the investigation. And I think even just the investigation itself would make a good story, because literally I've had to go into rural Virginia and meet with an informant in the back of a restaurant. It's like a Clancy novel, right?
Yeah.
Meet with them in the back of a restaurant because they're afraid they'd be seen in Washington, D.C. I mean, it's just that people are genuinely afraid of this. But since we came out with the interim report, of course, President Trump loved it because we're just getting the truth out there. We exposed that he did order the National Guard to be ready, that he wasn't, he didn't try to grab a steering wheel. He didn't throw a cheeseburger. In fact, my wife and I, he was in Rome a few weeks ago, and they asked us to come. And so beforehand, we were backstage with him, and we walked into the room where he was, and he grabbed my wife, Desiree, and he said, "Come here, your husband's a hero. He's exposing all these lies, and, that I tried to choke a Secret Service agent." He said, "Look at me. Hey, I'm a tough guy, right? Do you think I could take a Secret Service guy? Those are really tough." And then he said, and then the idea I would actually throw a cheeseburger. Take that. I'm like, he would eat the cheeseburger, right? And so he's, and I had told him early on, I said, look, if I come out and endorse you and we find evidence that exonerates you, nobody's going to take it serious. So I'm going to take this from a totally unbiased, and I told Kevin McCarthy, I will only do this if I can get to the truth and just get the truth out there. Let the truth be what it is.
Well,
and so
I appreciate you staying a little extra. We went a little bit over here, but I thought this is one of those really important segments in a courage tour, because we are making some history here. So they're going to come at you, and they already have. You hear all the assassination stuff. He doesn't talk about it. I remember when their vehicle got shot there, and it just had happened. And I said, "Hey, look, all shook up. How you doing?" He goes, "Well, they just shot my car." I go, "Oh, well, it's kind of hard to compare notes on what how you been lately when nobody shot my car."
Yeah, but you had yours burned.
I had mine blown up by Antifa, but I mean, you have several attempts. Mine is only one. But what I'm really interested in is how. I told Bannon once, I was doing an interview with Bannon, and I said, this is like Michael Corleone, after he takes over for the family. And Tom Hagen leans over and goes, "Do you know how they're going to come at you?" And he goes, "Yeah, they're going to make a meeting for me, where I'll feel safe." And so I said, "Steve, how are they going to come at you?" Now, Steve himself is like Navarro. He's being set up possibly to go to prison. And so our front line is like of journalists. They will find a way. This grandma that they're after now, they're going to have sentencing in August. 72-year-old grandma, Colorado prayer warrior, fasted 5 days, went up on her own up to January 6th, was up in the Capitol 9 minutes and 50 seconds, talking to the policemen and praying for America, doing a little walk-through prayer, and then left. They come back, the FBI shackles her in chains, drags her up to D.C. for a trial, and she's due for sentencing for 3 years in prison. This is like a big mistake on the left, because they're not covering this anywhere. They're not covering it in CNN or MSNBC. Because now we have a face of a victim for Merrick Garland, the Justice Department, and Joe Biden, and I think these stories need to get out. So my question to you is this: you're gonna have to run for re-election. You're running this select committee. So if I was the devil, what I would want to do is I would try to take him out of office. This is a guy who is obviously, I would say, on the Lord's mission, right? So where are you? How do you serve? What district are you in? We got Georgia people here. How can they pray for you? We got to make sure that you're covered in prayer and all this, right?
Yeah, and that means more than anything, because they are coming after me and my family. There was, I don't even want to give any details, but an attack on my entire family just recently. And look, I'm hated, but I'm hated for his name's sake, right? We know that. My district is, for those in Georgia, Cherokee County, Pickens County, Gordon County, Bartow County, and then part of Cobb County. And it's 11th district. And look, we always ask the wisdom and knowledge, and that the truth will be uncovered, and that God will continue to provide the protection, not just the physical protection, but the protection of our integrity and our what people think about us. Because one of the ways they destroy you is to spread false information, and then you attack the source of what's going on, and even they go after. You talk about getting the word out. As we were building our team, it took us a while to build it up. We started using some investigative reporters, giving them access to all the videos that we had and everything. And one of those is Steve Baker, who is with Blaze Media. You may be familiar with him. He was the one who was recently arrested by the FBI.
Yeah, what's up with that? They're arresting conservative journalists.
There were about 60 independent journalists embedded in the crowd that ended up in the Capitol 3 years later. They arrest him. Why? He's been the conduit of a lot of the investigation and information that we're getting out there. But what a lot of people don't realize is when he got the call by the FBI to turn himself in 3 hours after he left my office, sharing with me some of the information he had about some officers perjuring themselves just to get harsher sentences on some of the protesters.
May the Lord reverse this madness. And listen, man, that's why the Courage Tour is a spiritual weapon, because there's a veil over the minds of Americans. It's like a witchcraft. And I pray to God that this thing is pierced. And we need men like you on the front lines. Congressman, thank you for being with us. You're always a friend. Let's stand with him. Let's support him. By the way, how can they follow you? You got a social media feed here?
Yeah, standwithbarry.com. It's that simple. And you can also Google my name to, we do have a weekly newsletter on our official congressional side that goes out and covering what we found out with our investigation and other legislative work. And so if you just Google my name, you can find that.
Standwithbarry.com. Let's thank the Lord for this man of God. Thank you, Pastor. Congressman.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world.